Alright, hey kids, welcome to AP Psychology. This is Simon T, as you guys know. Today we are going to go over with some AP Psychology new FRQ questions with article analysis questions. This AP Psychology question is quite interesting because compared to the 2010 versions or 2020 versions, usually 2020 versions were all about just giving you some random definitions, and all you have to do was just state the definitions and how it applies to the concept that we already learned in the previous chapters. However, starting with the 2025 versions of AP Psychology is, yes, I understand that it seems like crazy as why is this question so difficult, but just no worries, no freaking out, because I'm going to try to engage with you guys as I gave you some papers in the last class about how to read the journal article in the psychology. Okay, so are you guys ready? I'm assuming you guys are ready. So let's go over with the question 1, okay? So before we start looking at the questions, we are going to just look up the papers in the next page, okay? So new random articles is given starting with the introductions. So now I'm just wanting to recap about how to read this paper section first, okay? So on the intro sections, all you have to do is you want to just briefly look it over what this paper really is about. Okay, so no need to be too focused, just skim through it for about first 15 minutes or so. Start looking over the introductions, followed by what the results were. Because as I mentioned to you guys, reading the paper is not about reading the books in a chronological order. So reading the article starts with briefly looking at introductions, followed by what the brief results were, and you're going to skim through it for about 20 minutes, okay? And then the third step is to just go back and see and what the details of this, how this study is conducted. So by looking at the methods, okay? And then just lastly, just briefly see the discussion sections and try to think in a broad picture about what's the meaning of this study at the end, okay? Let's look at the question together. Using the source provided, respond to all parts of the questions, okay? So all parts of the question, so each question is worth 1 point, so there will be about a total of 7 points, okay? So first one, identify the research method used in the study. So how you are going to answer to this question. Just looking at the journal article, the research method used in the study, as we learned in the chapter 2 of the research methods in psychology, just reading of this paper, you do not need to be too detailed about this question. So now, you guys saw on the page participants section that starting with the earlier study, which was conducted in 2017 and blah, 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 blah. To be accepted, participants have to be over 65 years of age if a woman and over 60 years of age if men. And then you guys can see that participants in group 1 received a pack of multivitamins, and participants in group 2, and you also guys see some placebo groups. So this type of study is, yes. So this type of study is called just experiment, okay? Now, for some students, now you guys do see that the thing about some people, they just randomly just look over it, and if you guys didn't really study, then you guys might think it as oh, I didn't really study, so I'm not exactly sure, I feel like I have to guess this question. So when you guys are guessing, just know that the FRQ questions weight slightly heavily, not just as a multiple choice questions, but it is also important in case if you guys miss the questions on the multiple choice questions. Okay, so how should I then recap and how should I study? How should I write this response? So since you guys don't need to be too freaking out, so when stated as identify, then on the A question, you want to be stated as like the research method. The research method is an experiment. Okay. For responses that really do not earn this point is like the research is a correlational study. Why? Because as you guys know that correlation study is like if this type of variable, like really looking at the relationship between like a variable A versus variable B, right? So it's like a comparison group. So but by looking at this study in general, it really does not fit into this type of a method, okay? Or the researchers conducted a case study. So for example, this type of responses really do not earn this point. Why? Because now, if you guys remember what case study is basically trying to track with this one particular person for over, for let's say about like it could be weeks or it could be months or it could be years. So case study is something like a type of a study that has like a kind of rare case. Like, oh, what do I mean by rare case? For example, on the research methods that I explained to you guys, type of a case study might be this like a pretty like rare like fMRI study where there were certain like brain tumors that that rarely seen in one like a particular person, whereas like a normal patients, they do not really get or they do not really diagnose in that certain brain areas, right? So that could be the type of like case study that we can use. But since this study is really not relevant to either case study or correlational study, so this one is completely an experimental study, okay? Alrighty. Then what can we see in question B? Ooh, it's an interesting question. So the question B is a state the operational definition of executive functioning. What? So this one is just a state the. Oh, I'm sorry that my markers are not working. So you can see that state the operational definition. So as soon as you guys looking up to this question, if you guys completely understand and completely study, then you guys should be immediately recognize this keyword called operational definition. Okay, so operational definition of executive functioning. So as you guys saw in the previous research method chapter, now can you guys tell me what operational definition is? Yes, that is correct. So operational definition is in this context. Remember that I told you guys that as you guys see this sort of like an expert like word, you guys sort of need to recognize the context, like rather than just completely like understanding, trying to completely 100% understand what the operational definition is, like like an academic context. Okay. So operational definition, by paraphrasing into an easy word, might be how the results were shown, or how the study was measured. So this is asking how. So this means that we need to specifically state about the operational definition. Okay. So again, like no need to write like 4 or 5 like long sentences for this response. This only needs to go with about briefly into a 2 or 3 complete sentences. Okay. So if I can show to this question, we can see that the operational definition, for example, let me see. Now, Mark, can you come up with like what the operational definition of study might be? Sort of, yes, interesting, right? Yeah, so operational definition. So maybe, for example, we can show that the operational definition in this context might be the might be this. So something, it has to be something that is measurable. Okay, so it's something that has to be measurable, and so this might be could be it's something that we have to be calculate or quantifiable definition. So maybe in the paper that we look at previous chapter, we can see that we can in a complete sentences the operational definition is, so we can write it as the operational definition is by looking at the results section. You guys saw the scores, right? Score is something that is calculable or that is quantifiable. So we see that is the scores, the scores on the executive functioning test. Just one complete sentence, no need to be 2 or 3, okay? Alright. Good. So now if you guys understand, let's look at the next question. Yeah, describe what the difference in terms of for immediate recall task for the multivitamin group as compared to the placebo group. So this one is just showing me about, it's not that difficult, right? When you look at the results section, let's go to the graph and see what the chart actually says, okay? So on the results section, basically you guys want to directly point up to this question. So for example, by looking at this results section, let's see, blah blah blah. Let's say compared to the participants taking a placebo or participants receiving a multivitamin had a significantly greater improvement in the recall task at the end of the first year. So the first thing that you guys need to look up is this little graph. Okay, the little graph that charts, let's say year 3 or year 2 or year 1, and there's like y variables showing about the improvement, right? The scores here, and this is the little little graph that shows the comparisons. So what can you guys tell just by looking at the graph, not what you guys think, okay? What does the data say? Yes, so we can see that, yeah, just by looking at year 3, we can just see that the overall improvement on immediate recall task seems like, let's see, the multivitamin group took about 1 versus the placebo group scored about 0.6. So there is a difference, right? Yeah, so this like the results show that we can see that the scores, so multivitamin group scored about 1.0, right? Compared to the placebo group's score 0.8. So there is a difference that the multivitamin group had a better immediate recall rather than a placebo group, okay? So all you have to do is you just need to state the exact sentences that I mentioned, okay? Okay, so this completely earns 2 points, but if you only just mention about, for example, by looking at the year 3, the multivitamin score was 1.0 and placebo group score was 0.8. If you just only mention to that sentence, that only applies to this 1 point. The rest, why? Because yes, I mean, you guys showed the evidence that is correct, but just stating the evidence doesn't really mean that you guys do you guys interpret like what the study actually means, or you guys really haven't interpret, right? So that only partially earns 1 point. So in order to earn 2 complete points, you guys need to state the actual numbers by evidence and also interpret what this results really means. Okay? Okay.